Destroying Media Narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And it is now time for our live stream, our Monday afternoon live stream. Afternoon for us, crack of dawn on the East Coast of the United States. So how are you, Peter?
Too many things happening at the same time to focus on one thing. It's kind of it's a crazy time right now, really crazy time.
Well, it's a crazy time because of the election. Means everything's really up in the air. We can't really talk about anything. Somebody wants to say something about whatever subject, either Middle East or whatever. It's always say, yeah, but everything just depends.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned
what happens in the election.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm kind of in a quasi debate with my boss because I do recordings on Tuesday, and I mentioned to him, I said, I don't think there's any point in doing a recording on Tuesday because I will finish the recording before some people, before even the ballot stations open in the U.S. And he has a hard time, like so many other people, understanding American.
Right.
But let me tell you something, George. Since we're talking again, we have to talk about it if we have no choice. Right. George and I had a very interesting conversation yesterday. It was kind of a Jerry Lewis marathon telethon. And it was good, and I really enjoyed it. But I think George has come up with something that I think we need to really keep a focus on, and it makes perfect sense to me now. We were talking about, Jeffrey Goldberg and Donald Trump is Hitler and all of this ridiculous nonsense at the end. And we surmised, well, I suppose this is the October surprise. We've got it wrong. It's the surprise after the election. And let me tell you what I mean. Mm-hmm. This whole storm of dictator, friendly with dictators. He's quoting Hitler. Hitler did some things right. This has nothing to do about coming to the election. It's everything about after the election if he wins. And mm-hmm. George tripped upon it. I'd like to think I helped him in our conversation, but they're building a case against Trump if he wins. This is what we discussed yesterday. I think this is what you and I distilled yesterday, and I think that we're on the right track.
I think so. I think so. I think it's what's so important here is that these are the generals. These are generals who are saying that Trump has no understanding of the American Constitution, has no understanding of America. He's a very dangerous person, and that the military, do have an understanding of the Constitution. They do care about their country, and they want to save their country from this interloper. And I think they're laying the groundwork, and the media are happy to do this. All these books that have been written, essentially with briefings by Milley and the top generals, is that somehow, Trump is just somebody, that he has to be removed. And fundamentally, the case that they are making, is exactly the same. Like, let's say Chile, Pinochet and all the generals, the top generals in Chile before Allende said, Allende is a danger to the Constitution. Allende is a danger to the rule of law. That's always the case at the military. They don't say, hey, we want to take power because we like power. And they say, no. We are the guarantors of the Constitution. We are the guarantors of the rule of law.
Well, our thesis works very well because there's always the argument, and a valid one, I think, Trump was already president. So what are you all worried about? No, this new narrative, this new plot is that the guardrails won't be there this time.
Right. That's right.
That's why all these generals are coming in. It's not attorneys general. It's not, Alan Dershowitz like lawyers. No. Focusing on the military is very purposeful because during the force war, I was there, General Kelly, I was there. I kept an eye on things. Okay. But there's nobody going to be minding the store this time. That's part of this matrix that is being rolled out. And this is all on the contingency that Trump wins. And my gut is, and George, I've talked about this, like it's about 10 days before an election, you start getting the itch. You got a gut.
Right.
You
Right.
say, this is the way it's going. I mean, it
Yep.
appears, could be wrong, because a lot of machinations can happen in between, but it appears that he's on his way. And it looks like the Harris campaign is just fizzled out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's in a kind of dramatic way, in my opinion. If you need, I don't even know how to pronounce some of these celebrities, but if it's celebrities are going to save you, you're in a bad place.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I don't even know some of the celebrities. So I saw these headlines. Oh, Kamala is appearing on stage with Lizzo, and I thought Lizzo referred to Liz Cheney, and it kind of annoyed me when I read the headline. I said, "Since when has Liz Cheney become Lizzo?"
I think Lizzo is this extra-sized person that, she's the one that, is against body shaming and everything.
Oh, is that right?
Other large people, okay?
Right.
That's just something that came across my feed.
Right, but I'd never heard of it, and
I think Lizzo works for Liz Cheney because he's like a lizard. Okay,
exactly. And
by the way, if you're going to finish your campaign with Liz Cheney at your side, this is beyond madness. Okay, you could the media elites and all that, they can turn, they can say, well, no, it's a different time and all. It's all rubbish. Okay. The Cheney family are poison, and people know that. Okay, veterans know that. Okay, so I mean, again, if it's going to be celebrities, it's going to be Liz Cheney, which, of course, George, you know what the quid pro quo is. Liz Cheney's on that stage because she's going to be Secretary of State.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the quid pro quo. Absolutely. And so everybody, as George and I always say, vote whoever you want. You're always going to get John
McCain. No question, because this is really Liz Cheney's, last best shot at getting anything. I mean, she's burnt all her bridges, obviously, with the Republicans. So she's been humiliated by the Republicans. So this is her shot to hang out with Harris. And you're absolutely right. If Harris does prevail, Liz Cheney is going to have some big job with the Secretary of State, Defense.
Oh, George. Let's use a parliamentary categorization here. There may be a President Harris, but Liz Cheney will be prime minister.
Yes, I think Liz Cheney will be. I agree. No, I do think. I mean, I think it's very important. I mean, what we were talking about a moment ago is that this stuff with the military is laying the foundation. That's the crucial. They are laying the foundation.
There's no other reason for using it. Why the military? This is because there is still a modicum of deference to the military. A lot less than it was when George and I were growing up. And we're Vietnam War era people, okay?
Right.
I mean, young, but it's such a stratagem because, like I said, if it's going to be former attorney general state, that's all. You're all political appointees.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. And I'm sure they all have allies and friends. I mean, Milley's now retired, but they have allies and friends within the higher echelons of the military. I mean, Milley was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, so I'm sure he promoted all of his friends and allies. And so when he says, "Oh, Trump is fascist to the core," whatever that means, that's going to have a resonance among the military. So we could well be in a situation of 7 Days in May, that that great movie from the 1960s. And it's very interesting. I mean, because here they hate Trump. Trump is at one and the same time a fascist, and he's also loves dictators, and he wants to pull America out of NATO, and he wants
isolationist. Yeah.
So it's like, he's very, very dangerous. He's really, very, really, really dangerous. He's going to do something reckless, and he's going to pull us out of NATO, and he wants to make nice with Putin. So all of this is combination.
The first fascist dictator that was isolationist. That's how bad it is.
Exactly. A fascist was also an isolationist. And the media regurgitate this. Yeah, he's a fascist and he's an isolationist. Imagine the horror of somebody. He doesn't think highly of NATO. You know, imagine that. He's just not impressed by NATO. He actually said, I'm not going to go to war on behalf of NATO member states who are not, who haven't paid their dues. You know, it's like, if you're behind on the rent, you get evicted. I mean, that's
well,
Trump's
it's interesting too.
mentality.
Over the weekend, or it was the last news cycle, Trump said he doesn't want to get into any new wars, and JD Vance basically has been touting, in a more sophisticated way, I would say, a future Trump administration's Ukraine plan. It's all coming into play.
Yes. No, I think that's very interesting. Vance is clearly making the signals. He's now said this explicitly several times, that they want to bring this war to an end, and they want to bring it to an end on essentially, you know, a ceasefire on current lines of engagement. Ukraine will have to make some territorial compromises. It'll be a ceasefire, no peace treaty, but it's basically that. And the point, however, which I think is important with Trump and Vance, and why it's the Russians might go for it, is that they're not NATO for them. They're not interested in NATO, and so that part of it, you know, which was, you know, the crucial issue at Istanbul, which is no NATO membership for Ukraine. They'll say, yeah, well, what do we care about NATO? I mean, you know, yeah, fine, we would. You know, we're not going to push Ukraine into NATO. It's a bad idea to begin with. NATO in itself is a bad idea. So sure, fine, no NATO membership for 25 years. Or, I mean, they probably won't say it explicitly, but that's what they're going to be thinking. So I think that's probably what they're going to try and do. I'm not saying that's going to succeed, but I think that's what they're probably going to try.
But what makes that part of the stratagem viable is that there would be a bipartisan push against.
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely.
And see, look, they're always keeping their eye on Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham. Okay, yeah. They got to. That's what they're doing, because if this kind of what George and I would call essentially tinkering. Right. This is existential. This is surrender monkey time. Okay, right. And they'll be on board for it. They'll be on board for it. Okay. Sure.
No, I think so. They will definitely move. But the point is that, you know, it's going to be 3 years. 3 years the war's been going. So there's going to be, you know, just the sense of exhaustion. Say 3 years. You know, let's bring this to an end. That's going to be a strong argument. There will be very strong resistance. There will be very strong pushback, and there'll be strong pushback from the military and all the people, the military people, and from Congress. You know, with, as you said, Cotton, Lindsey Graham, and a lot of the senators. I mean, almost all of the senators are on board. So even if there's going to be support among the Republicans in the House, again, some Republicans, not all Republicans, some Republicans in the House, among the Senate, there's not going to be very much support for this policy. So it would take a great deal of courage for Trump and Vance to go forward with that. So
yeah, but see,
by no means is it going to be.
There's something we have to iron out, and I don't have an answer. Maybe you do, Vance. See, that's why they have to invalidate the election, because Vance is not acceptable to these people. No, at all. Because he's a far more articulate Trump.
I agree. Because if they get rid of, if they remove Trump, they get Vance. And they think Vance might well be more effective. You know, he's articulate. Yeah. You know, he can make the case. You know, in the way that Trump just doesn't make the case.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, and you know, I've always said, I think we've been in agreement. I mean, Trump's enemies, large and far, you know, detest the man for some of his ideas. Well, Trump is very, very poor in articulating those ideas. We know what he's talking about. Okay?
Right. No, that's right.
The details are kind of lost there in his.
No, that's right. He's very good.
But JD Vance is very different. Okay.
Right. I agree. No, I mean, Trump is strong instinctively. He gets things right, but he's not really able to articulate them very effectively. But Vance can, and there's no question. No, I mean, that's why I think the ideal from their point of view would be if the Democrats capture the House. If they can capture the House, then they can prevent the certification of Trump's election. I mean, even, I don't know, maybe some Republicans would go along with it, but I doubt it. But if Democrats get a small majority, I think definitely they will not certify. If they don't certify the election, then no Vance either, because they say we're not going to certify Vance either. So next man up. Who are you going to come up with for the next man to certify? So that I think it would be the ideal from their point of view is to have that small majority in the House.
What we're trying to tell everyone, it's not the election; it's after the election.
Right.
Whenever the election is over, we don't know. Right. Okay, it could go into December for all we know.
Yeah. Again, we got all sorts of things, because nobody really knows at this stage to what extent the supposed reforms that had taken place since 2020 are actually in place. Because it may be that we're still back where we were in 2020. That there's a lot of people assuring, oh no, what happened in 2020 cannot happen again. I don't know. We'll just have to see. But I'm kind of pessimistic. I still think that they're going to do the thing with the suddenly finding boxes and bags of votes and trucks delivering votes at
Well, we can call it the Moldovan.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy. I mean, what we saw in Moldova is precisely what we've been seeing here. Once you know how many votes you need, then magically you find the votes. And
you got a warehouse full of ballots.
You got a warehouse full of them, and that's it. And this early voting and the mail-in voting, I mean, this is just so rife with potential fraud. I mean, you had fraud in the days when everybody voted on the same day, but now with this whole rolling elections that go on for weeks and weeks, it's so rife with potential fraud.
And that's the intent.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the plan.
That's
okay. You look for the fraud margin to get you over the line.
Yeah.
It's obvious. It's obvious.
That's right. Then yeah.
Well, and also there was a few reports a few days ago. I saw a clip of it on CNN. It was astounding, George. They built up these barbed wires and cement walls and helicopters, because they're counting the vote. They're just militarizing the election. Okay,
right.
I mean, it's what they're doing is preparing you. This is this consensus that they're preparing you. Be prepared for violence. There's going to be violence. Okay,
right.
It's not that they're quietly. We got to be on the safe side here. No, they're actually out there telegraphing. Be prepared. There's going to be violence because they know there will be violence.
That's right. Preparing for violence, which enables them essentially to practice non-transparency. Remember what happened in 2020? There was no transparency. You're supposed to have impartial observers observing the count, and then it turned out that went out of the window. People couldn't get in. So again, you say, hey, well, there's
security.
Election workers, exactly. Election workers feel their lives are threatened, and they're peddling the story. The DOJ keeps peddling that story. Well, election workers are really feeling very threatened. So yeah, we've got to keep the distance. Otherwise, these who knows, these MAGA people are going to come in and start practicing violence. So yeah, absolutely. That the security thing, enables a vote count that is less than transparent. Yeah, no, I think so. So did you watch the Madison Square Garden rally at all?
No, just because of the time difference and everything. I didn't see it yet on YouTube. Okay,
right.
Which I have to use a VPN by the way, everybody, to watch YouTube. It's a real pain. Okay, and I can only watch it on this. I can't watch it on a tablet or a computer. I can only watch YouTube on my phone.
Right. I mean, yeah, or Rumble as well. You have the same problem with Rumble. Yeah. So then, because
did you see it, George?
Yeah, I did see it. I thought it was quite interesting because it was the Trump all-stars were there. I mean, just everybody: Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy, Tucker Carlson, Vivek Ramaswamy, It was already everybody was there, and it was quite good. I mean, they were all they gave short speeches, with the exception of Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil just went on and on and on and on. It was really tedious.
Well, isn't it interesting, George, in Madison Square Garden, not for the reasons that the shitlibs talk about, but there's no way in the world Donald Trump is going to carry New York.
No. Okay.
No. So I thought it was really interesting because it was to marquee it was one of those rare kind of federal outreaches. Okay, because everybody, you have to remember, national polls show that Kamala Harris is up 2%. That doesn't mean anything. Just ignore it, okay? Because American presidential campaigns aren't built that way, okay? So I thought it was very curious that he would take such a marquee location, bring out the band, and this is for national coverage, okay? Because everything else, being in Butler, Pennsylvania, it's better to be in Butler, Pennsylvania than Madison Garden, okay?
Right. No, I think so. Look, I mean, Trump is a New Yorker. He's spent all of his life in New York. Therefore, he's very well acquainted with Madison Square Garden. I mean, this is something that's been a part of his life throughout his life. So I think he's always wanted to hold a big event at Madison Square Garden. So that appealed to him. And obviously, it wasn't about getting any votes in New York, but at the same time, one shouldn't underestimate that there are congressmen, Republican congressmen from New York, and if with small margins, in the House, you want to make sure you win those those congressional districts in New York State. So I mean, when they lost George Santos, they kicked him out, but George Santos had one of those congressional districts in New York.
A key seat.
A key seat, and then they lost it. And then
when you heard the latest about him, didn't you?
Yeah,
he got on Twitter saying it's all over.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, a big scandal is about to break, but no follow up.
No, he just continues his scandalous life. Okay, George Santos.
But of course,
they're going to make a Netflix series on him. He'll become a millionaire, and he will have said, "Mission accomplished." I can't remember now. He's pleaded guilty to something, but he hasn't been sentenced yet. Is that right? Or yeah, I think it is wire fraud for sure. But that's what they always get people on.
Right. So he's pleaded guilty to that, but the sentence I think will be sometime in the future. I think he's going to have to do some jail time. I can't see him avoiding
American hero, American original.
You have to admire him. I mean, he has a real tenacity, and again, he even has political skills. I mean, he won a congressional district in New York State. That's not an easy thing to do. He pulled that off. So you have to admire him. And I think, look, I mean, he's going to do some time in prison, but after that, I think he's probably got quite a spectacular media creator position. I can even see him doing some kind of a podcast talk show.
Yeah. Of course. He'll probably do well at it. I mean, the guy has talent. I mean, he doesn't have much morals, but he's got talent.
No, he does. Yeah, that's I have to say, I always admire that kind of a personality. A kind of that sort of very that sort of very pugnacious, opportunistic personality. You have to.
Well, it's those guys. I remember in the 80s and 90s. This is all before pre 9/11 security fanaticism. But like there's good in Washington D.C. There's a really fancy party. Like a few people really important, and all you do is you keep your tux in the trunk, and then you go and change, and you just walk right in. Hey, I'm here.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And the number of people that would walk in and they did it to Kissinger a number of times.
Right. Yeah. But
I'm here with Henry. Okay, and this guy. Right. Like a clerk in a drugstore.
Right. But you remember when that happened in the early days of the Obama administration? There was that couple, a kind of spectacular blonde. They walked into a White House state dinner. Absolutely, just walked right in, and then they kind of subsequently, after they'd already dined and everything, they somehow realized, hey, they weren't on the guest list. But it was just, I mean, how they pulled it off was that she was a spectacular looking blonde, and the security people, they just, their minds were just not on their on their work when they looked at this blonde, and they just waved them right through. And there they were, you know, taking photographs. I think there was they posed with Obama. You know, they sat at the dinner table, had the banquet.
Chauncey Gardner, all over again. Being there, one of the greatest films ever made, right, with Peter Sellers. Amazing film.
Yeah. So, but you know, so there was the Madison Square Garden thing. It was, again, it's interesting that they trotted out this whole thing about Madison Square Garden and this this event, the German-American Bund in 1939. And what's so interesting about the Democrats and the media is the way they put a story out and then everybody immediately repeats it. You know, it's like it's everybody has a particular role to play in how you get a story out. Hillary Clinton, of course, you know, is there, you know, in the forefront, you know, so, you know, Mexican, you know, that was the, you know, the Nazi meeting in 1939. It's amazing how everybody suddenly knows about this. You know,
yeah, everybody read
everything we know about Madison Square Garden, and then, they all suddenly know about this 1939.
Probably made a Wikipedia page 2 days ago. Okay.
Right, exactly. But somebody came up with this plan, and then everybody immediately repeats it. I mean, you have to, you know, it's a great organization. It's like, you know, everyone has their particular role to play here.
They're Bolsheviks. That's what they are. That's what they are.
Yeah.
Party line.
Yes. That's right.
Which, of course, they get the entire 1939 meeting wrong. Okay, it was German-American Bund. They did not want the United States to go into war, but they didn't invent isolationism. Everyone, it was already there. Okay, exactly. It was actually very powerful in the 1920s and the 1930s, but they make it look like the American German Bund invented it. It's not true. That's being dishonest. It's ahistorical.
Exactly, and you know, we talked before. We did a podcast a little while ago about Charles Lindbergh, and we examined a particular article that Lindbergh wrote. I don't know whether Harper's or whatever magazine at the time. He had no sympathy for Nazism. His focus was entirely that America has no business getting involved in other people's fights. It's just not our fight, and that was his focus, and that's a lot of people at the time were in agreement because of the bad feelings after World War I, where the Americans were pushed into World War I because all those lives that were lost, and then America got nothing out of it. Other than, you know, a lot of debtors, a lot of Americans ran up debts that they never paid off. So America lost all that money because, you know, people didn't pay off all the debts. So there was just a very, very strong feeling in the United States to avoid wars. And look, they passed the neutrality laws. I mean, you know, that's how intense the
Democratic Party control everybody. Okay?
That's right.
Not Republicans, Democrats.
That's right. And then Roosevelt illegally got around the neutrality laws. I mean, they basically, you know, there were neutrality laws on the books, and he got around it surreptitiously, providing arms for Britain, which again, you know, the Congress had specifically stipulated that you're not going to do that. You're not going to arm one side or another in any European conflict. So you're absolutely right. It has nothing to do with Nazis or anything. But they want to identify somehow. Oh, Lindbergh was a sort of Nazi sympathizer, and not such absolute nonsense. Lindbergh was
he was on a European tour. He was invited, and everybody everybody needs to grow up, okay? Because look at the media. In the 1930s, it was largely sympathetic to Adolf Hitler. Okay, it was not the kind of image, and we have the proper image. I'm not trying to dispel that, but you know, the views of Hitler's Germany. If you would read a mainstream media, you'd be shocked.
Right.
Well, how sympathetic they were.
Well, I think the really important thing was, I don't think it was about the Jews. I think much more important was that he was seen as a bulwark against communism. I mean, in the 1930s, the consensus view
That's
was
how they sold
the biggest
themselves.
threat was communism. Communists were a much bigger threat than the fascists, and so therefore, of the two, whom are you going to support? You support, the fascists. So I think that's why there was a certain sympathetic attitude towards Hitler, because communism was seen as a long-term threat, even though the Soviet Union was kind of weak at the time. It was a long-term threat because they're preaching world revolution, and people were terrified of
And also, in between time, everyone, a key conflict that is so important to understand the origins of the Second World War is the Spanish Civil War, because you had Westerners fighting on both sides in Spain. Okay, right. Americans fought with Franco. Americans fought with the International. I mean, it was a mess. Okay, and that was from the outside, it was seen as being very, very ideological, and people chose sides, and that gave fuel to this binary communism, fascism. Okay, and that seeped into the public consciousness. I mean, Hemingway was there. I mean, a lot of writers were there. Okay, and that was very much part of the public discourse. And there were a lot of people saying, you have to defeat the communists. If you're going to have to work with the Germans, that's okay with me. That's what people thought. Okay?
No question. That's what people thought. But you have to keep in mind, I mean, you had all these terrifying stories, based on fact, of what the communists had done. Communists had done in Russia, what the communists did in Hungary, where they seized power in 1919. So there were really, really, people were chilled that, these are how ruthless the communists were, and they were absolutely ruthless. So you had to be equally ruthless. So when they looked at Spain, you thought, hey, they're killing priests, they're executing priests, they're raping nuns. This is what the communists are doing. We have to support Franco. And then, but interesting enough, I mean, Franco was obviously he was supported by Hitler and Mussolini. Franco never repaid the favor.
No.
He didn't do anything in World War II, and then Franco just generally kind of faded away. I mean, he was a sort of basically a clerical dictator. That's basically kind of a right-wing authoritarian clerical dictatorship, and then he was kind of forgotten.
He made it all the way.
People remembered there was Civil War, but they didn't. It wasn't even noted.
All the way to what? 1970?
75. He died in 75. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the meeting that Hitler had with Franco is very well recorded historically, right. And Hitler. No, I mean, Franco was a sterling fascist in his mind. Right. I mean, he fit the bill. Okay, right. Unlike Donald Trump, but he fit the bill. And Hitler was astounded that, and I think they met in 1940, right? So I mean, things are looking pretty good for the Reich, and Franco said, I think I'll sit this one out. Thanks.
Yeah. He wanted
infuriated.
Yeah. He wanted to go through Spain into North Africa. Franco didn't sign off on that. You can't use Spanish territory to get into North Africa, and then he wouldn't send any forces to fight on Germany's side on the Eastern Front. I think his comment was, "I'd rather spend 8 hours with the dentist than in another meeting with Franco," and he kind of said, "That's it. I'm not wasting any more time."
Hitler should have been surprised, because the Spanish Civil War was gruesome. It was ugly, really ugly. In Europe, at least, I think it happened. Well, maybe it was before the Japanese bombing of China, but I mean, this was industrial.
It was from 1936 to 39. So by 1939, Franco.
The first time, at least in Europe, industrial bombing of a city, and it was very well recorded. I mean, and it was really terrifying of what a future war, and it ended up being true, would be like. So
Yeah.
the Spanish Civil War, there's some really good really long documentaries on YouTube, a many-part series which I've watched, and they're quite good. But if you really want to understand the 20th century thoroughly, you really need to understand that conflict as well.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, it was because after the Bolshevik Revolution, it really was like there was a great struggle between the communists and the fascists, and most right-thinking people thought that, well, the fascists aren't as bad. We may not like them, but they're not so bad. And Mussolini was well thought of. Remember, I mean, Mussolini, he was at Locarno. He met all the statesmen. No one thought, hey, we can't be seen in the company of Mussolini. They thought, no, he was part of the international concert of powers. I mean, he was at the Munich. He was at the Munich conference. He was the broker. He was the sort of the honors broker at the Munich conference. So it was only afterwards, after he decided to throw in his lot with Hitler, that somehow Mussolini became this villainous figure. So I said, oh no, we've got to play. I mean, and Churchill himself thought, hey, the biggest enemy we have is the communists. And even early on, I think Churchill had nice things to say about Hitler. But the Churchill, I think, for opportunistic reasons, then kind of switched his position. But he had nice things to say about Hitler. Certainly had very good things to say about Mussolini, because the real enemy were the communists. They were all convinced that these are the people that we have to worry about. Because it was, they remembered the French Revolution. The French Revolution, we don't want anything like that again. A revolutionary power, and then with spreading its its tentacles everywhere.
Yeah, and you have to remember too is that one of the first times the Bolsheviks made the headlines in mainstream media was the slaughter of the royal family. Okay,
yeah.
These are the kind of images and ideas that were spread, and the 1919 and bleeding Budapest, bloody Hungary. That was a pretty nasty affair too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they did, and then Churchill, famously wrote that that article, one about about the Jews. What are we going to do with the Jews? Because you have one strand of Jewry. They're the ones we see in power in Russia. These horrible people like Trotsky and Zinoviev. These are they're the worst kind of Jews. Or alternatively, we have Zionism. He said, well, basically, we've got to kind of make a decision which way we're going to go. Let's hope the Jews take the Zionist course and don't take the Trotsky course. But that was, again, that was very much the perception. These communists, who are the communists? The communists are the Jews. And, we've always had our doubts about them. We've always had our suspicions of them. And, hey, we were right. The moment they get their hands on power, they start slaughtering people.
I got a question for all our viewers here. So, George, I figure you and I have been talking about this particular topic for, about 15 minutes, 17 minutes. Okay, folks, have you heard anything like this watching the news in America? Anything? And one word of what we've just said. Okay, this is basic history. This is commonly held consensus history. Okay, and we're not revisionists here. Okay,
no,
and that's what infuriates me when Rachel Maddow talks about these things. She has no idea what she's. No. She may have She actually may have an idea, but that's what makes her so maniacal, is that she does a revisionist history.
Yeah, but I don't know that she does. When you bring up a subject like
scholar, I mean, how do you get? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for her, pretty much everything boils down to the same thing. She hates the Republicans. She hates Trump, and so whatever subject you bring up, it's always how do I use that in order to bash Trump? So Trump, anti-Semitism. That's anti-Semitic. Hitler, Trump. Communists, Trump as well, because the Putin and whatever. So it's everything boils down to these people are so narrow-minded. They're so ignorant of everything. It's just everything always boils down to Trump and the Republican. And she's pretty much she hated the Republicans even before Trump came along. She was always filled with loathing for, somebody as innocuous and as useless as Romney. I mean, people who remember the 2012 campaign, the guy was being hit over the head, time and time again. This useless person, but they were making sure they didn't have to keep whacking him over the head. But he never fought back. Which is kind of what endeared them, the fact that he just, he let it all slide. So yeah,
he wasn't his father's son.
No. That's
his father was a quite effective politician.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Anyway, let's take a see what's going on in our well, I find it. Yes, our locals page. These are the good people who have subscribed to us. Well, at the moment there's not that much. So go back here, and so one thing I wanted to talk about is what we've already been speaking about over the weekend, which was the events in Georgia. Now we had the
election. We have an update.
We have an update, exactly. So we have the comfortable win by the Georgia Dream Party, 54%. So that's a comfortable win. And we had the very, very strange events of an election night when the president, the parachuted in president, declared that according to her exit polls, the opposition had won, which was very, very strange. And the opposition parties themselves said, "Yeah, we won."
Maybe because she was given tentative results in Georgian, but she only speaks French, so maybe she did. Okay, I mean, I really have to wonder: does she live in Georgia, or she just?
That's right.
A Georgian presidency studio in her chateau.
I wonder exactly. I think she's lived all her life in France. I just wonder, whether she really, now wants to spend her days in Georgia when she's got a very nice, probably a very nice apartment in Paris. So I don't know, and I also not really sure how good her Georgian is, and it's
without naming names, okay. But I know a few Georgians coming from wealthy families, very international. London, New York, okay, Italy. I know how they speak Georgian, and it's a kitchen Georgian. It's, I'm hungry. Can I have some water, please? I've had enough. May I be excused? Okay. Right. It's kitchen Georgian. I would bet you my bottom dollar that she speaks kitchen. She can talk to dogs. She can talk to dogs and cats. Okay.
That's right. That's exactly right. So anyway, she, of course, said yesterday, "I'm not going to accept these results. I'm just not going to accept them." And she called the masses out onto the street to protest this election. And the European Union is sort of going along with it.
And with Michelle came out, yeah.
With the exception of, who is the exception? Well, it's our friend Viktor Orban. And here is Viktor Orban, who is on his way to Georgia after hailing ruling party for overwhelming victory. So I think he's on his way. So I think he's going to be there this evening.
You know what I really like about him is that he's not in a popularity contest, George. He's stuck in the dagger, and he enjoys twisting it. Okay,
that's right. So every time he does this, there's all this fury in Strasbourg and in Brussels. How dare he? Yeah, I dared. So, yeah, I'm going to do it. It's like he sent out this tweet on election. I mean, I think pretty much, the moment the polls closed, he already sent out a tweet congratulating Georgia Dream for this election victory. And it says, Hungarian PM's visit prompts anger in EU amid widespread concerns about voter intimidation and coercion. So always anger in the EU. I mean, there are obviously people in the EU who would love to kick him out, but they don't want to do that because that might give other people ideas. Say, hey, maybe there's a way to, to get out of the EU. Hey, we can just be so obnoxious that they're going to kick us out. Um, and um, and so here it says Viktor Orban is heading to Georgia after congratulating the ruling Georgia Dream Party for its overwhelming victory in parliamentary elections, despite widespread concerns about intimidation and coercion of voters.
Well, let's stop right there. Despite widespread concerns about intimidation and coercion of voters, who's intimidating?
Right.
They make it they're leading you to think it was the Georgia Dream Party that was doing it, but it's not clear. It's very passive. Okay,
you're absolutely right. Exactly. Who's doing the intimidating? They have absolutely no idea. Then it says Hungary's prime minister will lead a delegation of his senior ministers. So not only is he going, but his foreign minister is going. I think his finance minister is also going to meet Georgia's prime minister Irakli Kobahidze in a two-day visit that is likely to anger fellow EU leaders at a time when Hungary holds the rotating EU presidency. So there's still November, December, there's still a couple of months to go. They can't, they've been longing to get him out, but he's still got a couple of months to be the president of the EU. Orban does not represent the European Union on his visit, the bloc's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, told Spanish public radio.
Is Borrell still on the job?
Yeah, I thought that that woman had taken over. Kaya Kallas had taken over, but I guess he's still there. I don't know, when's the handover supposed to take place? The union's rotating presidency has no authority in foreign policy. They keep saying that, but he's still doing all these things. So, okay, I have no authority, but I'm still going.
Well, I think he has single-handedly come up with a peace initiative that includes Russia and China. I mean, yes. I think that shows a kind of experience in diplomacy.
I think so. Yeah, I agree. It's not that easy to get yourself a meeting with Putin and
he's only the prime minister of Hungary. It's
exactly. Yeah. He's just the prime minister of Hungary. They can just say, I'm not wasting my time on this. I've got bigger fish to fry. But nonetheless, he got those meetings. But the key, what gives him power, what makes him, why he punches above his weight, is his relationship with Trump. I mean, ultimately, I think he does. He does have a close relationship with Trump. If Trump is president, then his role in the world is really elevated. And Trump obviously likes him. He brings Orban's name up in every speech. So by now Americans are quite familiar with this person, Viktor Orban, because in every speech Trump brings up, oh, Viktor Orban, he's this really tough guy, and look what he says about me. So he has that weight. I think that people do. I mean, Xi Jinping, Putin assume that he actually is speaking on behalf of Trump, or at least he has an in with Trump. In a statement released on Sunday, co-signed with the European Commission, Borrell flagged concerns about reported pressure and intimidation of voters during Saturday's elections. We call on the Central Election Commission of Georgia and other relevant authorities to fulfill their duty to swiftly, transparently, and independently investigate and adjudicate electoral irregularities and allegations thereof. Note that they didn't make that statement about Moldova. There was irregularities about the election in Moldova, or at least the referendum on Moldova, but somehow they were all hailing this great victory, but there were no demands.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, though. This is a statement coming from the European Commission. Commissioners that were not elected by anyone. So why are they so concerned about the electoral process?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Exactly. Yeah, now, it is always very funny when Borrell and Ursula von der Leyen, they're talking about democracy. You know, they're the least democratic people in the world. I mean, they purport to speak on behalf of millions when they have no business speaking on behalf of anyone. And then the Hungarian leader arrives in Tbilisi as the opposition calls for protests over election results that dealt a blow to Georgia's EU membership hopes. And then Georgia's pro-EU president has said she does not recognize the results and that her country had fallen victim to a, quote, Russian special operation.
Well, I'm going to top her. I don't recognize her rejection.
I know.
I'm on the record that I reject her.
Yeah, you're exactly. Yeah, I don't recognize it. That's right. Yeah, yes. The Hungarian,
the canard Russian special operation. It's absolutely, completely fabricated, out of thin air, out of whole cloth nonsense. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it is just sort of, you know, they invented this. I mean, they haven't even laid the groundwork in the way they did in Moldova. You know, they spent weeks and weeks, months and months laying the groundwork for this, for the claim, oh, the Russians are doing this or Russians are doing that. But here they didn't do that in Georgia, so that's why it's so ridiculous. Russian special operation. Where were the Russians? What Russians? But she kind of figures, well, if I say Russian special operation, I'll get a sympathetic hearing in Brussels.
Just as an aside, everyone, there is not one pro-Russia party in Georgia. Not one.
No, that's right.
For the record, everyone, there's no pro-Russia party in Moldova.
No.
Okay.
No.
Not at all. No. It's only an issue. It's a canard that they get the FT's attention and New York Times attention, okay, right. And the European Union's Commission's attention. But it's not an issue in play.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. It's just something that they know the media will immediately regurgitate. Oh, pro-Russian. He's pro-Russian. So it's just, so their readers who don't know very much will say, oh, he's the bad guy, obviously. Oh, they're pro-Western. Oh, pro-Western, good. Oh, that must be the good guys. That's all. It's just, you know, you have, whom am I supposed to hate? Oh, I'm supposed to hate these people.
Well, you know, the people that are going to be hated in all of this is that the NATO vultures.
Yes.
They're going to be, over the weekend, they're looking at the electioneering.
Yes.
Western electioneering. So how's it going? Okay.
Yes.
When do we step in? Okay.
Yes.
That's where the hatred is being spread around now.
Right.
You screwed up. You screwed up. You didn't deliver. Okay.
Yeah.
You're making our job just a little bit more hard. Okay.
Right. Well, yeah, but you know what they did in Georgia with all these NGOs. I mean, the reason they adopted this Foreign Agents Registration Act legislation is that they just overwhelmed Georgia, this tiny country, with these NGOs. They were all foreign funded until the point is that Georgia's just simply said, we can't take this anymore. I mean, there's so many of these NGOs, you know, the idea is obviously to run Georgia from abroad. And so, I mean, it was, I don't, you know, the numbers were something like, you know, there's probably one NGO per, 10 residents or something. It's just an extraordinary number. And I think that it just blew up in their face. I mean, they just simply went over the top, so to the point that the Georgians just simply got sick of it. The Hungarian prime minister issued his congratulations to Kobachidze and the Georgia Dream Party for their overwhelming victory before the election results had even been published.
Okay, then, but see, that's a snarky. Go back.
Yes.
Go back. But that's a snarky thing to say, because there were politicians on the ground that were calling the election before the election results had been published. So they're making it look like he's getting ahead of the shark. No, he wasn't. Okay.
Or even worse, that the election was rigged, and he knew that it would be rigged. A team from the European Parliament sent to observe the elections said it found one case of ballot box stuffing, as well as, quote, physical assault on observers attempting to report on violations, observer and media removal from polling stations, tearing up of observer complaints, intimidation of voters inside and outside of polling stations, presence of multi-party affiliated observers posing as citizens.
But George, to whose advantage?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's the point. When you read these complaints, okay, but they're not saying, oh, these were representatives of the Georgia Dream Party. They just said, well, we saw this, this, and this, but you don't know. And were they from the opposition? I think that they're probably from the opposition. We know that they're very prone to violence. I mean, we may well see some violence tonight. So when they talk about voter intimidation, I mean, they may well be the people who are doing the intimidating.
I think that I'm safe to say here that I'm the only one in our gathering that has seen rent-a-crowds in operation. I've seen rent-a-crowds in Georgia in operation on all sides. Okay, I'm not picking on anyone, but I mean it's prevalent. It's very prevalent.
Yep. The Spanish center-right MEP Antonio Lopez Isturiz White, who led the delegation, also said that there had been efforts to undermine and manipulate the vote, such as pressure on state employees to take part in campaign events and vote, as well as misuse of state resources to benefit the ruling party. We expressed deep concern about the democratic backsliding in Georgia. Now, the thing is that this doesn't, these descriptions, they don't seem very impressive. It doesn't look to me like that you've got much of a case. You had, 54% voted for the Georgia Dream. You're going to have to do better than that to attempt to overturn this election result. I mean, that's all. Well, I saw a few instances of some ballot stuff. A couple of people being intimidated.
Got any pictures? Got any video? Got any audio? Were there video cameras at the polling stations? Let's see what it looks like, huh?
Yeah.
What do we do one? Let's just do some random ones and see what it looked like. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. So I mean, it'd be interesting. It'll be interesting what happens. I think it's kind of interesting that Orban is going there today, precisely when there's likely to be some violence. They're calling out massive demonstrations. So it's interesting that he's showing up on the day that there's likely to be violence. I think he's anticipating exactly what the EU is going to do. They're going to come along and say, "Oh, it was all the Georgia police, the Georgia police beating up peaceful demonstrators. The demonstrations were all very peaceful. It's the Georgia police that beat them up." So he's anticipating this, and I think that's why he's showing up there on this day.
See, but this is a pattern, and it's historically grounded. Is just because the election is over doesn't mean it's over. Okay, no. I mean that's the whole point. Okay, it's not over until they say it's over. Right. Okay, right. Again, the voters don't count. Okay, because they voted the wrong way.
That's right. It's very interesting.
I mean, it happened in the U.S., George.
That's right. It's very, very interesting that we're getting more and more of the situation that the elites, the EU and the US, are actively working against democracy. They're actively working against elections and votes. I mean, the EU has always been like that. I mean, whenever you remember back about 20 years ago when they used to have referendums in the EU, like the European Charter, they're going to have a referendum, I think, in France to adopt the European Charter. And of course, the French went and voted against adopting the EU Charter. They had a similar thing in Ireland. And again, they voted against it. And so the EU then said, okay, well, we're going to have this election again. And we're going to keep having these votes over and over again until you get it right. So it's always been a part and parcel of the EU that they're just not going to accept or the democratic will.
The best example is when they voting on the European Association Agreement with Ukraine. The Dutch voted against it, and the European Union just ignored the result. Doesn't matter.
That's right.
Just ignored it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's why the EU was so stunned by what happened in Britain, because they kind of assumed well, there won't be any consequences. Okay, so you voted, but who cares? And we're going to have another vote, and then another vote, until finally you get it right. But it didn't work in the case of the British. But that's why they have to make sure that you just don't have any votes. I mean, we've talked before about there's been not one referendum in any country about NATO membership. Not one, except the very, very first one. The first one was Hungary, and even then they couldn't get the right number of people to vote. People just didn't bother to show up. And since then they said, no, absolutely not. No one has a referendum. We're just going to bung you into the NATO. They did, Sweden and Finland, when we were talking about that, hey, this is a major change in your foreign policy. Shouldn't you have a referendum and ask Swedes and Finns whether you want to really make this huge shift in foreign policy? No. The polls tell us that it's overwhelmingly popular. We don't need no stinking referendum.
Wow. I wish I had that kind of belief in polls. Don't you, George?
Yeah, I think so. 90% are supporting NATO membership. So that's it. That obviates a referendum.
Again, very selective. You selectively move forward with polls that you like.
The ones that you like. But of course, the argument was still that, okay, well, the polls may show this, but maybe that's still an opportunity for a debate. People can present, arguments on one side and another, and then maybe the public will change its mind. I mean, so far the public's only been exposed to one side of the argument, but maybe that's the whole point of a referendum campaign, is that, people, both sides are able to present their argument. They weren't going to take their chances. No, you're not going to take any chances, if you allow people to present the opposite argument.
Finland and Sweden having such a long history of and successful history of neutrality.
Right.
Again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Often people would say, well, historians will explain to us why. Now we need psychologists to explain why. Okay. Not historians.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. I mean, the case of the Swedes and the Finns, this was they were bludgeoned into it. I mean, it was so quick. I mean, this is a fundamental change. I mean, remember when you had the Brexit vote in the UK, it was a long campaign, a long debate, years of debate that had taken place in Britain about the EU. It wasn't just something, well, let's just, have a quick referendum and be done with it. In the case of Sweden and Finland, this was just, they moved quickly, and it was over within weeks. The only reason why it didn't happen right away was that Turkey and Hungary, held things up. Otherwise, it would have just been done in about 2 or 3 days. So that is just contempt for the democratic will. I mean, you can't, when you make fundamental changes, you really need to allow people to digest, to think, to debate, but they don't do that. So I mean, it's like what we're talking, last week on Moldova. This is a constitutional change to the Moldova the constitution, which is EU aspiration. The aspiration to be a member of the EU will now be enshrined in the Moldovan constitution. 50.1%. That's it. That's enough. Now, you're not supposed to tinker with the Constitution when you get 50.1. I mean, you got to get usually 2/3 of the vote before you start messing around with the Constitution.
Why do you have to put it in the Constitution? I don't understand.
I don't understand that either. But that's kind of what they did in Ukraine. I mean, they changed the Constitution to make EU and NATO, the aspiration for EU and NATO as part of their constitution. I don't know what the logic. I would say, well, we'll make it Yanukovych proof. But even if I don't know how you make this Yanukovych proof, because if there were another Yanukovych, he could still change the constitution and make it go the other way.
Well, I mean, also it's a open invitation to NATO machinations. Who's in this office? No, NATO's in this office. What? Well, it's in our constitution. We have aspirations. They said it's okay. Right. We're agreeing with your constitution, and I'll take the building next door, please. Okay. Okay. Right. What it is it lets cockroaches in your house. Okay.
That's right. That's right. It's a very interesting issue because we were talking about this Professor Jonathan Haslam the other day. the sort of the NATO, the cockroaches, you use the analogy with the NATO's cockroaches, these cockroaches kind of moved into Ukraine very, very early on. This is long predates, 2014, 2008. This was in the 90s. It was already in the 90s that were kind of creating all these NATO Ukraine institutions at the time when nobody in Ukraine really wanted this, but they kind of pushed it forward. The Orange Revolution was, of course, it was a big deal, but this happened before. This was already in the 90s. They were already creating these NATO Ukraine institutions. So almost from the start, NATO was not going to allow Ukraine to go its own way. I mean, it's not going to allow Ukraine to pursue an independent foreign policy. I mean, this is right away, right? The moment the Yeltsin and Kravchuk kind of dissolved the USSR, NATO, the NATO cockroaches moved in.
And that's what this is all about. George and I talk about these elections. Not very many people do, but the only goal is to get them into NATO. It has nothing to do with democracy. It has nothing to do with the EU. Moldova in the EU will never be in the EU. The EU will collapse before Moldova gets in.
Right.
Georgia, it will not get into the EU, no matter what it does. Okay?
Yeah. No, it's always about that. And again, why was it so important for Ukraine? Well, because it's the path against Russia. And that's the only reason. I mean, this is the way. If you're going to encircle Russia, it's the key part of the plan was Ukraine. And that's why they push this and push this and push this. And again,
George, I'd like to point out to our viewers here, I know that there were a lot of comments about our discussion with the good professor. That's all it was. It was a discussion. It wasn't a debate. It wasn't designed as a debate. Okay, it was more about NATO and its aspirations since the Cold War, and that's all it was. So we weren't good, and I was pleased to have him on. I'd like to have him on again, but it wasn't designed as a debate. It was designed as a friendly discussion.
Yeah, it was a friendly discussion, and he's a very knowledgeable man. He studied the area, and so it was a it was a very good discussion. And listen, his book, I think, is full of a lot of fascinating information. And but again, I mean, if you look at this path that was taken by NATO, what's really intriguing is how quickly NATO did this. I mean, this was really fast. You go to 1991, and through all this time, from 1991 through to about, let's say, 2008, all this time, NATO keeps scooping up one country after another. And in public, NATO is saying, oh, this is all about ending the divisions in Europe. Oh, we're trying to just end. No, we kind of create, we want to end the Cold War. We want to end these barriers in Europe. We want to one Europe.
Why don't you establish a pan-European supper club?
But they didn't do that. And so they did that. They continued lying and lying and lying because they're talking in this way, and people listen. So, well, that sounds good. An undivided continent. I'm all for an undivided continent. It was all lies. It was all, lie after lie after lie. And they were, what was important is that they were lying to the Russians. They lied, in the early 90s when they said, no plans whatsoever to bring Eastern Europe into NATO. No, we're not going to do it. Not going to do it. Then they kind of say, yeah, but what about this? Oh, that's just partnership for peace. That's just partnership for peace. I
remember. I think it was with the late Stephen Cohen, a debate about NATO expansion, and his interlocutor said one of the primary reasons for NATO expansion in Eastern Europe was to avoid a conflict between civilian and military authorities. And he looked, just got a blank stare back at the guy. What are you talking about? Yeah, I think the Hungarian military, they're going to stage a coup any second right now against the government. It's absurd.
Yes.
Absurd.
Right. That's right. And then they say, well, what is bringing stability? It's going to somehow bring stability. But the problem is that.
But was there instability?
Exactly. And you know, you think, well, okay, but how are you bringing stability if you are expanding up to Russia's borders, and the Russians are telling you we don't really like it? You know, just simply assuring, well, we're a defensive alliance, and nothing for you to concern yourself with. Well, why would anyone expect, you know, you to take NATO's protestations at face value? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Just because you say you're defensive, we're supposed to just take your word for it. When you keep expanding, but NATO kept doing that, and that's why there was really very little debate. You know, they just rushed this through in country after country because of these ridiculous slogans. Oh, we're bringing stability. Oh, we're making sure that, you know, democracy is firmly established in Europe.
And the Russians knew they were being lied to the entire time.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's why, you know, in February 2022, it was like, okay, enough of your lies. Okay,
right.
Okay. You know,
Yes.
Everybody, again, I may be repeating myself here, but the way the media likes to project the current conflict in Ukraine is David and Goliath. Well, in February 2022, the largest military in Europe was in Ukraine.
Right.
Okay. I mean, a lot of money was spent, hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay. The Obama administration, even the Trump administration, this was turned into a bulwark against Russia, and the Russians knew it. Okay.
Right.
So you make it, you know, suddenly out of the blue, woke up in the morning, will invade Ukraine. No, it was methodical. It had to stop. Okay.
Right.
And there was this whole idea of indivisibility of security. Everyone should have security. But in fact, this whole NATO expansion exercise was at the expense of Russia's security.
Right. That's right. And they knew this because they could easily have tried to figure out some way in which they would integrate Russia into this NATO and turn NATO into a kind of a comprehensive European security architecture. They didn't do that. So they took this organization, this anti-Soviet organization, and started bringing in countries that had been members of the Warsaw Pact. So their erstwhile allies was Russia. And that they knew that in a number of these countries, there was deep hostility towards Russia. So they knew exactly what the consequences were. When you start bringing in Poland, start bringing in the Czech Republic, and then Hungary, you knew what you were doing, that you're essentially tilting this already anti-Soviet alliance into an anti-Russian alliance. And just because you say, we're just defensive, we don't mean any harm, we want to work out something with Russia, but you're expanding at the expense of Russia, then you're always going to get a reaction. It was always going to happen. I mean, George Kennan said this. He said this in 1997 or 1998. He said, you are going to get a reaction. Because the Russians are not going to tolerate this indefinitely. Look, this is Kennan, leave aside his diplomacy. He had written many books about Russian diplomacy and Russian history. So he knew something about Russia. He said, trust me, you are going to get a reaction. This is just crazy what NATO's doing.
It's completely blotted out. But everybody in the 1990s, it was a heated discussion,
right.
Very heated discussion. But they make it appear now that was never the case. Before all this, particularly before 2014, if you were to type into Google NATO expansion, you would have gotten hundreds of thousands of things to look at, articles, books, debates, I mean, but they make it sound like now that it's just ipso facto. Of course, that's what right and good and secure for all. I mean, these people, they want to erase any kind of past discussion on these issues. I remember in the I remember not debating, but heavily discussion with people at UC Berkeley and Stanford about this, and it was really kind of evenly split. A lot of people said,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
but
you got a good point there, got a good point there." I mean, that's all gone now.
well, but what happened in the 90s was that once the governments of like the key governments of NATO got behind NATO expansion, that there was really that's it. It was just a juggernaut. There was nothing that you could do to stop it. Once you get the United States, and the Clinton administration was absolutely crucial in pushing it. And obviously, when you had Madeleine Albright as the U.S. Secretary of State, but it was even true before then. In the first term, with Warren Christopher and Anthony Lake, that's it. They got behind it, and the UK got behind it, and Germany got behind it, and well, that's it. And it was there was just nothing that you could do to stop the juggernaut. Russia was much too weak to do anything. All the complaints that the Russians made were rigorously ignored. So there's nothing you could do, and so therefore, whatever the debates that they had, and there were debates, and even there were senators, congressmen who were unhappy about it. They were just swept aside. It was just simply, it was just a juggernaut that you just couldn't stop.
Yep, absolutely. I think we had a question here from a paying visitor.
Oh, as a paying visitor, I like it. These are my favorite people. Let me okay. Where is it? Yes. All right. Let me. Okay. So Judy Hotchkiss, our good friend Judy, always appreciate you, and Judy says appreciate the show. Well, thank you very much, Judy. Always happy to hear you. Monday AM is always a hectic time for me. Yeah. Okay. So I have you in the background. Okay. But George seems so perky at this time of day, maybe because the sun is still up. Yeah, it's
not for me.
Not for very, it's already, I think, on its way out. Not too much sun here, I'm afraid, but thank you so much. It is early. I mean, I think that's it's a problem with the different time zones that we're all in. We have Peter in that time zone, and now the clocks have moved backwards, and of course, in the United States, it's still, so. It's a problem. I mean, it would be great if we could do it later, but the time zones are what they are. Anyway, Mojo 1980. But thank you, Judy. Thank you so much for your generosity. And the Mojo 1982 says, "Hi, George and Peter. Can you please invite Vladimir Ishchenko for a friendly discussion about Ukraine, the war, its economy, Soviet past, etc. I think he would be a great guest and would have very informative discussion. Ishchenko is a left-wing academic, right, though pro-Western. He criticizes the nationalists and understands Ukraine's economy is closely intertwined with Russia. He wrote a book called Towards the Abyss." I think that's a good idea. We'll have that.
Was he interviewed by Max Blumenthal?
I don't know. Was he?
It seems to ring a bell.
Yeah, maybe so, but I think it's a very good idea, yeah. So I think that's that'd be good. I was thinking of inviting on as a guest Professor Perry Anderson. I think people may kind of recall Perry Anderson was a kind of a famous. Kind of leftish academic.
I met him once. Yeah.
Well, you remember this Perry Anderson, and then his brother Benedict Anderson. Benedict Anderson died.
Both behind me, both on the book.
Yeah, that's right. So Benedict Anderson wrote that famous kind of book. Very critical of nationalism. Again, like leftists, Marxists. They had no time for nationalism. But the book he wrote, Imagined Communities. But anyway, Benedict Anderson is now passed. But Perry Anderson is still with us. I mean, he's in his 80s. He's
well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't read it as anti-nationalist. I think what it was for me was more of a exploratory typology of what nationalism. I didn't get the sense that he was denigrating it. I think he was just explaining how it works. That's
well,
how I read it.
I'm saying is well, I think he was saying nationalism is a kind of a fake consciousness. I think that's that's the thesis, which is, which I think Marxists have had. It's false,
but it is a consciousness, okay? Even if it's fake, it does inform people. Yeah,
it's false consciousness. I think that was always the leftish view. I mean, it goes back all the way back to 1914 and after the Russian Revolution as to why didn't the working class join forces with other working classes, but instead they stuck by the ruling classes of their countries. And so you had to explain that, and you said, well, hey, they were going against their class interests. Well, because there was something called nationalism, and they said, oh, nationalism is something that's artificial. It's an artificially created construct rather than class, working class consciousness. I think I think that's always been. I mean, both with Benedict Anderson and with Eric Hobsbawm. I mean, he also wrote a book, kind of very, very negative book about nationalism. I mean, that was a time in the 1980s where a number of books just like about that. Somehow nationalism was the wrong path taken. I mean, look, it's a very good book. It's a very interesting book.
Oh, I've read it many times. I think it's beautifully written. Okay. Yeah. Remember how the book starts out is the Vietnam-China border war. He started out there, and nationalism wasn't something malignant just to the West. That was one of the things he was trying to point out, which I thought was smart.
Right. But
nationalism was invented by the West. Okay, well, that's a kind of a very shallow interpretation.
Right. No, that's right. I mean, but I had to explain. I mean, Ernest Gellner also wrote a book about nationalism. I mean, there was a real cottage industry in the early 1980s about trying to explain nationalism, how this was.
Got a lot of books on nationalism.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it was an interesting topic, but nonetheless, I mean, it's obviously something that does require explanation. Why don't people have class consciousness? Why isn't it class conscious? Why doesn't that work? Why did the working classes identify with their ruling classes? These are the people who are exploiting you, and yet you fought
because of the title of the book. Imagine community.
Exactly. So that's why. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's why.
Right.
And how do you fight against that? It's really hard.
It's really hard. And
I mean, nationalism, because of the way the left has treated it, it's some kind of dirty word. For me, it's a neutral word. I look at it as negative. Is that when all else fails, what do you have? You have your imagined community. So when communism, totalitarianism, greenism, feminism, when all that doesn't answer your needs,
right,
your community does. Okay, and it's an imagined community. That's why the title is perfect.
Right,
because what did Margaret Thatcher say? There is no such thing as civil society. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you can make that claim, but a sense of community that is, at the end of the day, that's what people will fall back on.
They will fall back on.
And it's incumbent upon people to explain, well, then why is that? Okay.
Yeah. No, exactly. And so that's why they had to start, explanation as to what exactly is nationalism, how it came about, because the most spectacular event of the 20th century was what happened in 1914. 1914, according to the Second International, that huge organization, the Socialist International, where all the socialist parties of the world were members, and they all said, no, war is impossible because the working classes of one country are not going to turn their guns on the working classes of another country. That was the thesis of the Second International. And then boom, in August 1914, that whole idea collapse. So you have to some extent, well, why didn't that happen? I mean, when the German working class is going to identify with the French and the British working class, it didn't. So you have to come up with an explanation. So
yeah, but I mean, again, it sounds like a slur, but we have to be more specific in what I'm meaning. What I mean is, there was a bourgeois nationalism as well. Okay.
But I think bourgeois nationalism is, that's always been the case. I mean, that thesis, the explanation for the imagined community was always that it was the bourgeoisie, the ones who created that nationalism, and unfortunately, they say, but the proletariat embraced it, and so, but the inventors of nationalism was the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, and George is absolutely right, because the left embraced it, but bourgeois nationalism to its extreme, going to the right, gives you elements of fascism. Okay, so I mean, the thing is that its trajectories and what it is used for, its uses and misuses, and,
Right.
and that's a lot of what the debate was in the 1980s and 1990s. But
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember, was it Macron and his infinite wisdom? I think it was when Trump showed up, he was talking about the difference between patriotism. We made a video about it. I mean, the guy was just freaking word salad. He had no idea what the words meant at all.
Yeah,
okay.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But anyway, so that was Benedict Anderson, and then Perry Anderson wrote kind of books about more like social anthropology, a kind of a sort of leftish accounts about the absolutist state and so on, giving it the social basis of the absolute state. I think it was called something, The Lineage of the Absolutist State. I think that was the title. It was a famous book.
I would get it, but it would take me 10 minutes to find
it.
Yeah.
It was
Lineages of the Absolutist State, right?
That's it, the lineages of the absolute state, yeah. But anyway, I mean, Perry Anderson has now published a book about the origins of World War I. I think it's 6 different essays about the origins of World War I. And that's always been a subject I'm really always been fascinated by, because just I mean, it was never supposed to happen, but it happened, and so that's always really interesting. So it's 6 essays. It's the kind of thing that we at the Gaggle are interested in. So I don't know whether Perry Anderson does interviews, but I mean, if I can get hold of him, I think it'd be a good guest for us, and be a kind of a really fascinating discussion exploring the different origins of World War I. It's very surprising. I wouldn't have expected Perry Anderson to be interested in that sort of thing. I've always thought of him kind of social anthropology, but this is a different line of work.
It's the reason why serious scholars, not this junk history that people are banding about, but I mean real scholars. I mean, you have to understand the outcome of the First World War was so overwhelmingly devastating, and we've never really gotten an answer why. I mean, it's always been kind of dangling out there. That's why we have bourgeois national. That explains it, okay? Or the failure of the international. That explains. It gets maybe over the target a little bit, but to this day, we don't have a very clear understanding how that catastrophe happened.
No, that's absolutely that's exactly right.
And those that claim, and I'm pretty much in that school of thought, is that the Second World War, even though it has a lot of different features to it, is an extension of trying to resolve what that catastrophe that has happened, that started in August 1914. It was only resolved by half the continent being occupied by the Soviet Union and the other half being occupied by the United States. It didn't answer anything, anybody.
But even that didn't really resolve it, because that only just put things on temporary hold.
Shut it down. That's what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, but 1945 to 1991, that was one solution to the crisis. But now we continue along the same path, which is, again, you're having a kind of creating an imbalance
in Europe, an imbalance of power in Europe, of a overwhelming kind of Western-dominated the European continent directed at Russia. So you get, again, you're back in the same kind of crisis that you were in before 1914. But you're absolutely right, because we can go through the diplomatic history and all that, the July crisis, and then all the different elements, the creation of the Anglo-French Entente, the Franco-Russian alliance, and so on, and that's all very interesting. But it doesn't answer the question. Yeah, but why did it end up in a war? I mean, because after all, there've been crises before. There've been plenty of crises. You go, the whole era from sort of 1848 to 1914. It was full of these international crises, but they never degenerated into anything as horrific as this. So that's really fascinating as to why did this particular crisis, which wasn't really, it was nowhere near as bad as previous crises, why this one led to this explosion.
And from starting in August 1914, Europe never recovered, even to this day, has never recovered.
No.
Okay.
No.
It's just been a slow transformation into what I don't know. I think it's going to turn into a sand trap. I really do. Europe's an optimistic prognosis for Europe is it will be vacation resorts for Indians and Brazilians and Chinese and Russians. Okay, like kind of a huge Disneyland.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
That's my positive prognosis. Okay.
I think that's right. I think that's much of Europe is like that. I mean, it's like a tourist destination. I mean, you think of all these places, throughout Europe, they don't really produce anything very much other than spectacular sights. A real sense of history. And so what are people going to do? Whenever they're making money, well, come to Europe and see all these castles and all these.
Just go to Budapest. Budapest is a gorgeous city.
Yeah.
You know what I like about Budapest? I hope George can back me up here. But it doesn't really matter the season. I mean, it's still a really cool, beautiful. It's
a beautiful city. I mean, I don't know about the seasons. I'm very.
I know you don't know. Okay.
Let's see if there's anything we can address, and then we'll.
Well, as George is looking at our reactions here, you can see what our passion is. Okay, yes. I mean, we are very passionate about particularly modern European history and trends, and I think it's really important to look at mega trends. Okay, that's why we could, using August 1914 as a point of reference to look backwards and forwards is really really helpful, because the media and most of academia today, it is so it's so granular that is there any sense to anything? Okay,
absolutely. I mean, it's the level of the discourse is so shallow, and we've had academics who come on here and who are they're fairly centrist, fairly sensible, and they complain about how they're under pressure. They're somehow, hey, you're not sufficiently anti-Russian. You're not sufficiently down on Putin. And with now that there doesn't exist what used to exist, which is tenure. If you're an academic and you don't follow the appropriate tracks, you can be in trouble. You're on contract. They just cancel your contract. Say, well, this guy's a Putin apologist. They could just simply cancel your contract. Now, in the old days, when you had, before Thatcher, you had tenure. Once you're an academic, you could just write whatever you want.
In fact, you can just simply not even produce as a number of academics. They didn't produce anything. You have a job for life, but that's no longer the case. And so there's a great deal of pressure for conformity.
Is that a tram in the background?
Yeah. I mean, at least the good thing is there are no police sirens. There's always police sirens here. So, so
I saw a comment that bring Dima back. Okay, we'll keep that noted.
Yes. So, well, we got, and I mean, next Monday, we will have, it'll be the last day before the election, the last, because that's it. The election campaign comes to an end on Monday, and we know, Trump, he does these things on the last day. He does something like 4 events, which is just phenomenal. The stamina that he takes to do these 4 events. So we're gonna, probably do that. But it's also kind of amazing, where we've come to. I mean, when we started the Gaggle, we were in the middle of the 2020 election. We were talking about the 2020 election, and then everything else. This finally we've come to an end. We've come to the end of the campaign, because this is really, we in a way that we've been waiting for the Trump comeback. I mean, it wasn't clear that Trump would be able to.
It was not clear.
Yeah.
George knows I was really skeptical. Okay, and even as far back as like 2 or 3 months. I mean, I lamented over and over again, this is an awful campaign, lackluster. And then, I don't know. I mean, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. McDonald's.
They're eating the pets that live
Arnold
there.
Palmer and the Al Smith. I mean,
right. Yeah. But that's right. But that was the thing. I mean, he, I thought after January the 6th, I thought maybe it's going to be difficult for him to come back. But it became clear quite early on that he still had great sway within the Republican Party, because I thought, if everyone in the Republican Party now distances themselves from him, it's going to be hard for him to make a comeback. But it became clear even when what was the name of the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy. Well, once Kevin McCarthy made his pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, it was clear McCarthy tested Trump.
And he kissed the ring.
Exactly, he kissed the ring. I think they knew exactly. He knew then that Trump is a force, and
Kevin McCarthy wasn't.
Kevin McCarthy wasn't. But at the same time, here's the interesting aspect, because for the past 4 years, the sort of the MAGA movement, all this, who were disappointed by what happened in 2020. So this is a large group of people have been just simply waiting for their leader to return. Now, if Trump doesn't win, fails on next week, they don't have anything to look forward to. And so you then wonder, how will they react? Because now, there's not going to be, Trump's not going to come back in 4 years' time. So you'd have to think, well, how would they react if, particularly if they try to pull another 2020? I think that it could be an explosive reaction.
But also think about this as we go into the final days. If we hadn't had all of those shenanigans in 2020, Trump would have been finishing his second term.
Yep.
Then he, the exit history. Okay.
Right.
I mean, if that had happened, maybe for a couple of years he would still want to have elderly statesman, kingmaker status, but that dissipates quickly.
Right.
Look at Obama, stumbles and bumbles along with it. I think in the next cycle he's pretty much He's done. Okay. He doesn't have the Midas touch. Okay. So just think about
You're
that.
talking about Obama or Trump?
Obama, but I mean, Trump's age and all of that. I think,
Right. No, I think that's it. That's why I think that
role. But given his ego and all that, he'd say, look, I did everything I wanted except for I didn't get the Nobel Prize. Okay, but other than that, I think he would have been quite satisfied with himself. The conflicts that we see now, George and I just don't like to play that counterfactual history stuff. This war wouldn't have started about. I just don't like going there. I just think it's a waste of time.
It is a waste of time. However, I really don't think. I certainly don't think the Ukraine war would have happened under Trump. I mean, I don't know about the Middle East, but I think that they're just. Trump would not have given any kind of encouragement to Ukraine that NATO membership is just down the road, and I think that's kind of what really triggered what happened.
It's fair.
In Ukraine, I think that Biden was.
But there's always the caveat. Just because Trump said something, with his branch of government listen to him? We follow all of the time.
Yeah, no, I think so, but I think that I just think that if you go back to December 2021, if Putin had issued those documents on December the 17th, 2021, which the Biden people just ignored, I don't think Trump would have ignored it. I think Trump would have probably taken that as an opportunity to have some kind of a peace conference, something. He would have taken it seriously. I think the problem was that the Biden people didn't take it seriously. I think Trump would have taken it seriously. I mean, obviously, we don't know counterfactual, but I just think there's enough on the record to suggest that I think Trump would have been receptive to Russia's security concerns in the way that Biden wasn't.
But it might have revived Russia. It might have revived Russiagate.
It's what?
Would have revived Russiagate.
Yeah, but he would have taken. Look, he did. After all, he had that.
I take your point. I think it's
that's right. I mean, he did have that meeting in Helsinki, and so that was. But I think the kind of the really interesting thing to hear is that. But first of all, Trump will now have his own team around him. I don't think he's going to surround himself with a whole bunch of Pompeos and Boltons and Rex Tillersons and McMasters and all, John Kelly and all these people. I think he's going to have a different team around him. Now, that may have a different, may have the same outcome, but I think it'd be different. At the time in 2017, really, Trump didn't know anyone in Washington. You go with what's available. Oh, Mr. President, this person, he knows about national security. Appoint him. Oh, all right. Oh, he's a 4-star general. Appoint him.
That's how Fiona Hill got into the
exactly. Fiona Hill. Oh, well, she really knows a lot about Russia. But he's not. That's not going to happen now. I think he does. He's much more. I mean, I think he's much more aware of things and who's on his side. So I have my doubts, or maybe I'm being optimistic. I just don't think it's going to be he's going to once again have all those
but George,
Mattis and Pompeo and all the rest of them in his team.
As we wrap this thing up, we're going back to the beginning of our conversation. That's the danger if Trump is elected.
Yep.
That is the danger that he faces between whenever the election is called, hopefully in this calendar year, and Inauguration Day. Because I'm still not convinced that if he does win the election, he will be inaugurated. I
absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree. I absolutely, and I think you're right. I think that is the danger. Precisely that. Hey, it's not that he's now be unchecked. No, it's that. He now has his own team around him. He's no longer going to be reliant on all the Washington hands, the same people who have been, around, in the George W. Bush era, around in the Reagan era. He's not going to do that.
Well, I mean, George, the irony of the ridiculous hysterical rhetoric. I mean, it truly is hysterical, this Rachel Maddow stuff,
Yeah.
building of camps and all of this. And
Yeah.
but the irony of it is that it's Trump and his new circle that may end up in a camp, okay? Not the American people.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think well, there's a lot of, a lot of very bad things that could happen. Anyway, I think our time is up. I think we've discussed this these issues, very these difficult issues on who, fairly exhaustively. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? I mean, it's not going to be a nice linear path. Oh, election result. That's it. Mr. President. Start building your team. It's not going to be like that.
Nope.
But anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
You're all witnesses to history. It's and it's I still think it's a tragic one. Okay, sorry, George, interrupt.
No. I'm just wrapping it up. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody who has joined us. Sorry about all the confusion about the time zones. I mean, it's not our fault. It's the stupid practice of turning clocks back. Some countries turn their clocks back, some don't, and it creates so much confusion. Nobody knows what time is anything. So I'm sorry if it caused confusion among people, but we'll hope we can resolve this. And there's Johnny Apple, not at all happy, not a happy camper. Nothing going on in the tip jar, so there's nothing going on with me. That's it. I'm out of here. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining us. We will be back on our pre-election live stream next Monday. Hope you'll be able to join us. In the meantime, I've got my solo Tuesday, so please join me then. It's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern time. 4 p.m. Eastern time. So just remember that. So if you please join me 4 p.m. Eastern time. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. Bye, Johnny.